Hi, I'm Veronica Lee. It is the week of October 11th, 2021. This is your weekly transformational forecast, and I want to say that the information I'm bringing through right now will be not just about this week, but also sort of a collective energy we're moving through. So just a little bit of a wider picture. One of the things I have not done a lot of talking about over the past year and a half-ish has been around the COVID and all of the mandates that are going on. And part of it has to do with me wanting to really remain inwardly centered, right? There's so much going on outwardly, and there's so many opinions and bickering and all of these extreme philosophies and debates going on, that I really wanted to remain inwardly more centered so that I could stay connected with what feels most resonant for my truth. And I highly encourage you to do something that works for you. So if for you it is to remain active and engaged, and that is resonant with your soul, then by all means do that. And if it feels most resonant to sort of pull back and stay in your center, then I highly recommend doing that and finding ways to do that feel right for you. What I want to share about this whole picture around COVID is it is clearly a virus. And one of the things that I have been contemplating, looking at, discussing with other people is this picture of virus as something that our bodies potentially need, and what is the gift in the virus, right? And if we think about it in terms of any sort of obstacle that we face in life, whether it's illness or struggle of some kind, sure, we can choose not to have those struggles as best we can, right? Why go into a situation where we know we're going to be kicking and screaming and fighting? But there are times where things just happen, and our job is to move through it and gain from it what is there, what is the gift in that. As this virus has been such a biggie, right? It's hitting so much of the population around the world. There's a part of us that is looking for some kind of significant change, and perhaps this is that, instigator. What I see the value of virus to be is it helps us shift into our next stage of growth. So therefore, an evolution, right? There's this sense of stepping into and evolving into our next level of consciousness or of being in some way. When we have fevers when we're young, we often, are taught to suppress them. Adults, don't get fevers. We shouldn't let them get too high, etc. And at the same time, what we will find is if we can endure much of the fever, I'm not suggesting that we go into any sort of convulsions or anything like that, but if we can refrain from suppressing it or steering it in a different direction with superficial means, then we can ride it out and allow for the body to do what it needs to do with as much strength and wherewithal that it carries. And of course, all of our immune systems are different. So I'm not speaking at all from a health perspective. I'm not a health practitioner. I'm speaking from an energetic, soul, spiritual connection with our bodies. So if virus is here to help us evolve and to shift into the next level of consciousness, collectively and individually, then it makes sense during this global, shift towards higher forms of consciousness, higher ways of seeing things, that there would be a backlash or a pushing or a suppression of that in some way. Whether it's because it's what we as humans feel most comfortable with, right? Medication is familiar. There's, this way of thinking that says, our bodies need, these things to support it, that have been, scientifically proven to fix this, that, and the other. Most doctors will agree that the flu isn't really curable, but that it is something we, can ride through and make it easier with any kind of drugs or any kind of, support, right? So it's, whether you use something homeopathically to allow the body to sort of work with whatever's coming to us, or whether you use more allopathic means, which generally speaking, they all agree, are just working with the symptoms, right? They're working on the symptom level. So any change that we go through, whether it's the death of a loved one, whether it's a new job, whether it's something that's pretty big and significant, will cause symptoms of discomfort. And whether that symptom is anxiety or whether it takes on some physical form, those are the outcome, the symptoms of this great change and this great stress in our system. And once we get through it, we are usually stronger and more confident and more aligned with who we are and what our gifts are when we overcome, when we get through those hardships. So what I'm speaking to in this collective way is, what are the ways in which your body, your soul, are trying to move you through something that's difficult so that you get to the next level, so that you get to this next phase of your own evolution, so that you have these breakthroughs, spiritually, physically, whatever. I will also say, as you may or may not know, my husband was terminally ill and had a disease that was not compatible with something like any kind of virus, let alone something as detrimental, let's say, as COVID. So absolutely, I would want to have him protected for the time that he had, on this planet, and not necessarily be hit with this huge respiratory thing on top of his ALS. That being said, for those of us who are healthy, these are the questions that we are facing, right? How are we approaching this next phase of our evolution? And how is it that we want to form the inner strength to move through that level? Does it feel best to take on, a vaccine, or it's technically not actually a vaccine, but to take on something that is, going to work with your system from an allopathic sense? Or does it feel most aligned to work with the more natural repercussions of actually getting COVID or building up your immunity in other ways? These are deep, deep questions. They're very personal questions. And of course, they've become public questions, right? And we are in this place of looking at all of that. One of the things I want to finish this off with is, if our collective is trying to expand, trying to move into higher realms of consciousness, which are intensified this past week and up until the next couple of weeks, where we're in this really intense pattern, it makes sense then that anything that doesn't want us to change is going to try to suppress that and keep that from happening. Now, it's not about us versus them. Whenever people go into that sort of place, I try to remind, each of us that we are them. And so what part of ourselves wants to suppress and hold back, excuse me, on our own evolution? What part of ourselves is wanting to stay put and stay safe and stay in our old patterns and our old ways of being? So questions to think about, and a lot of intense energy going on right now. So just be as gentle as you can with yourself. Recognize that, we are these sovereign, independent beings, and we are part of the whole. And navigating through that can be really tricky. And the key is to keep coming back to what is aligning in your system that's speaking truth to you. That is the key. Not easy, not fun, but it's part of the deeper work that we're working through on our planet right now.